Hello and welcome to another video. In this one, I'm going to be shaking things up a little bit and doing something completely different from the normal movie, TV show, all that kind of discussion you're used to hearing on this channel, and talking about some of my favorite music and some of my favorite genres and artists within those. So I threw this up on a poll randomly on my channel just the past couple of days. Got pretty much universal positive interest in it. So I'm really looking forward to doing something a little bit different on the channel. Let's get ready. Let's jump in. Welcome once again. My name is Austin. If you're unfamiliar with this channel, typically I talk about faith, film, and everything that's in between. But in this video, I wanted to talk about something different and some of my favorite music, genres, artists, that kind of thing. If you're not someone who's too close with me, you might not know I'm a really big music fan as well. I think hobby-wise, I would say movies are kind of my top thing, but music is a very close second behind that. I absolutely love music and a lot of different types of music and artists and stuff, and I'm really looking forward to being able to kind of share those and hopefully maybe give some recommendations for people who might not be familiar with these artists, because in my opinion, they're some of the best ones out there. So this is something I'm really excited about. I always kind of set up the channel with the intention that I could branch out a little bit more and talk about stuff besides movies and TV shows and stuff. That's why I just named my channel Austin St. Pierre with my name rather than something like Faith and Film, which is a lot of the thematic stuff that I talk about. And even beyond that, just with my channel being faith, film, and everything in between, opening up the door to be able to talk about that other stuff. So again, I'm really excited about this. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's kick things off. I have a list of a bunch of stuff next to me because if I don't write it down, I'm not going to remember it. So let's kick things off with the movie related stuff. And we'll talk about some composers with their soundtracks and stuff that I listen to, because I'm a really big soundtrack guy. I've mentioned it several times on this channel. And personally, I tried to do 5 for all of these here, of 5 picks of artists that are my kind of top favorite ones. If I look over here, it's because I'm referring to that list. So first and foremost, we obviously have Hans Zimmer, probably my favorite composer working today. And to date, the only composer I've been able to see live in performance, which was an incredible experience. I got to go see him in Chicago this year, which was fantastic, getting to see the run of some of his most popular soundtracks. Personal picks for me would probably be the Dune soundtracks. Those are my absolute favorite of his, for Dune and Dune Part 2, the Denis Villeneuve films, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with. Besides that, we have the Dark Knight series, as well as the Pirates of the Caribbean, and one of the really underrated ones of his, I think, is the Last Samurai soundtrack. I think that's a great movie. The movie's kind of underrated as well, but especially that soundtrack is absolutely incredible. Besides him, we also have Hiroyuki Sawano, who is a Japanese composer. He composes a lot for animes. And so I got into him through the Attack on Titan series, which is one of my all-time favorite TV shows and probably one of my favorite anime series as well. He got to do the entire series run for Attack on Titan, and it's some of the most common music that I go and listen to when I'm listening to instrumental soundtrack stuff. I think the soundtracks throughout this entire series are just absolutely beautiful. The way they utilize so many different instruments, add so much epic tonality to the scale of everything, with all of the different use of different instruments, different types of instruments. There's a lot of classical stuff as well as some synth stuff thrown in with electric type instrumentation and stuff. So I really love the creativity that they've implemented in this series throughout, especially musically. And Hiroyuki Sawano is one of my favorite foreign composers for sure. Besides him, we have one of my all-time favorites, Howard Shore. Most notably, obviously, in my case, for the Lord of the Rings series. I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, and he's done some great soundtracks outside of Lord of the Rings, but for me personally, Lord of the Rings is where it's at. They're my go-to soundtracks. I absolutely love listening to these. I think they're some of the best music scores ever written. The world is so much more alive and breathing and immersive because of the work done in these soundtracks. There's so much unique work with choirs, different instruments, different motifs and themes throughout that are just built upon throughout the series in such beautiful and powerful ways that Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings soundtracks are some of my favorite of all time. And then we also have Ludwig Göransson. So most notably for me, Ludwig has done Tenet, Oppenheimer and The Mandalorian soundtracks, Oppenheimer being his most recent one. The Mandalorian is where I discovered his work. He had done some previously with Black Panther and one of the Creed movies as well, but the Tenet movie, or The Mandalorian, is where I discovered him, and I was like, this guy's really good. And that's when I started listening to some of his older stuff, and then he not long after that did Tenet, which I absolutely loved, and I really liked his work on Oppenheimer as well. I think my personal favorite of his so far has been Tenet. That's one of my go-to soundtracks for him, but his other work has been fantastic as well. And then lastly, on the soundtrack side of things, we have John Williams, the GOAT of scoring and soundtracks. Obviously, he's done countless amount of soundtracks. If there's a franchise for it, he's probably done a score for it. And so most notably for me is going to be Star Wars, Home Alone, Jaws, Jurassic Park, Harry Potter. All of those soundtracks are some of my personal favorites of his. There's so much nostalgia there for me with my childhood, but also there's just so much world building that's done, kind of like with Howard Shore's stuff, through the world and the music that kind of enhances it. So those are my favorite composers and soundtrack musicians, that kind of thing. Moving on to some foreign stuff really quick. For me personally, I listen to a lot of anime music because, as I said, I've listened to Hiroyuki Sawano's work, but I really like a lot of different anime songs too. So it's a very big variety because there's a lot of different musicians and composers out there for that. So that's kind of my cheat a little bit with that one. Besides that, I'm a big fan of Baby Metal. Got to go see Baby Metal just a month or so ago with some friends. That was a great time. Thoroughly enjoyed that. I only just discovered them this year through a friend of mine. So it was really cool to both discover them, really like them, and get to go see them all in the same year. So Baby Metal is definitely one of my favorites when it comes to foreign artists. And then Survive Said the Prophet. They're another metal band, and I discovered through Vinland Saga, which is one of my favorite animes. They did a couple of the different openings and closings for that series, and that's how I discovered them, and I really liked their music from that. And then I started listening to their stuff outside of anime and have really enjoyed their music there as well. And then lastly, foreign, they're not together anymore, but one of my absolute favorite bands is HB, just the letters HB. They are or were a Finnish symphonic metal band, and they were Christian symphonic metal, which was a really unique niche that they had. They did several Finnish albums, but they also did a few albums in English as well. I was a huge fan of their English stuff. Their Finnish stuff is really good too, but I listened to the majority of their English stuff, which included the album Frozen Inside, the Jesus Metal Explosion, and the Battle of God. The lyrics that this band put out were some of the most compelling and convicting lyrics I'd ever listened to from a Christian band. Every time I listened to them, I wanted to live a better life. I wanted to live my faith more on fire for God, and it's not been that common that an artist can do that through their lyrics. Besides that, their music was absolutely beautiful. They utilized metal in such a unique sound through the symphonic kind of niche. They had amazing drum work, fantastic guitar solos. The singer has an absolutely beautiful, angelic voice. She's an absolutely incredible singer, and it was really cool that she was able to do the English and the Finnish side of things and still have such a beautiful voice. Not that I would have expected her not to, but I just think that that translated really well too. So they're one of my absolute favorite bands. If you're looking for something more unique, and especially on the Christian side of things, because sometimes it's hard to find that, HB is one of my top recommended bands. Since they're not together anymore, it can be a little harder to find their music if you don't already own it, but I can't recommend them enough. So that's my picks for foreign stuff. So now moving into probably some of my favorite music genres, I'm going to do a few different genres here. So I'm going to go through indie music, rock alternative, and then metal. So quickly not even quickly, just this is what it is. It's going to be a more chill, relaxed video. It's probably going to run on for a while, but on the indie side of things, so my top two favorite music genres are probably indie and metal. So I'm either looking to be just thrashing and headbanging when I'm in the car, or I want to be just absolutely chill, mellow, listening to indie music. So my favorite indie artists probably include Jonathan Allen Wright. This is one I've discovered just in the past couple of years. He's got a newer EP out called Stories that tells some really cool stories through the songs. And then we also have an album from him called Doorways and Tombstones that's really good. And he has a single that's a collaboration with another band I'm about to mention. The single is called called All the Ways That I Fail You, and the collaboration is with the band Mudhouse. So I've really enjoyed his music. I discovered him through other indie artists that I listened to and then Spotify would recommend to me. And so besides him, we also have Mudhouse. This is one I just discovered earlier this year. They were on my Spotify Wrapped as one of my top artists of the year. I was absolutely obsessed with their first album that they put out last year called Good Omens. I literally probably listened to nothing but this album for almost a month straight. That's how obsessed I was with it. It is one of the most unique sounding Christian albums out there. The lyrics are so rich in the scriptures that kind of fill them, while at the same time not sounding like the tropey, K-lovey type Christian lyrics I'm so used to hearing in the Christian realm. So I absolutely love them, and they have that collaboration song, like I said, with Jonathan Allen Wright as well. And they're actually from Ohio, literally like an hour or two from where I am. So I'd love to get a chance to see them live sometime. They're a very small band, so they don't do many shows, but next time they do one, I definitely want to be there. Besides that, we have Tyson Motzenberger, one of the coolest last names, I think. He has an album that came out a couple of years ago, well, a few years ago at this point, called Someday I'll Make It All Up to You. This is another one I got obsessed with. I listened to like nothing but this album for like 2 or 3 weeks straight. I listened to it so much, my 2-year-old started picking up on it and caught on to a couple of his favorite songs in it too. So this is another one. It's very outside the traditional types of words that you would hear in Christian music. Some of it would kind of be controversial, I think, in the things he talks about and discusses in his music, but I think that's part of what makes him so interesting lyrically as well, is he's not afraid to talk about some of the more taboo topics that we get with and that aren't always mentioned in Christianity. Besides him, we have Collington, which is one I've been into for a few years at least now. He has one album and several singles out. I like his album, but I love a lot of the singles he's been putting out over the past few years or so. I caught on to him because I thought he sounded a bit like the singer of Switchfoot. A big Switchfoot fan, but I thought he sounded a lot like John Foreman from Switchfoot, which I really liked, but it was kind of through a different flair. So it was almost like something similar to Switchfoot. So if you're into Switchfoot, I think you would like Collington as well, but he's a bit more on the more unique sounding worship side of things. So that's where he kind of fills that indie type role. And then lastly, under the indie artists, we have the Grey Havens. The Grey Havens I've been a fan of since I was in college, probably about 10 years ago now. We actually had the unique opportunity to have them come play at our college. We were a small town Christian college, so that didn't happen very often, but this band was very new and fresh at the time, and so it's actually a husband and wife duo. Their name, Grey Havens, obviously if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, that would have kind of tickled your ear a little bit, and you'd recognize it as from the world of Middle Earth. And they're both big Lord of the Rings fans, so that's where they got the name the Grey Havens. But they have some of the most beautiful music. They have this really cool folk indie kind of sound to them. I don't think I've found anyone else out there like them that I enjoy quite as much. They have a couple albums that I really like, The Ghost of a King and She Waits. Both of those have some not only fantastic songs on them, but just as a whole are really good too. So those are my favorite indie artists: Jonathan Allen Wright, Mudhouse, Tyson Motzenberger, Collington, and the Grey Havens. Moving into rock, which for a long time was probably my favorite genre, especially Christian rock. All of these artists will be Christian artists here that I'm going to be mentioning. First, we have Flyleaf and Lacey Sturm. So Lacey Sturm was the lead singer for Flyleaf back from, I think, 2005 or so. I discovered them on their Memento Mori album, and then the very popular song I'm So Sick that I think was featured in a Rock Band game or Rock Band 1 or 2. So that's Flyleaf. I think they're one of my favorite rock bands of all time, probably. She has an amazing story of her life and how God rescued her from so many hardships and trials that she was facing, and it's very evident in the music that she writes and the lyrics that she writes. I love Flyleaf, but I like her solo stuff even more. She's put out a couple of albums now, and both of them have been absolute bangers, really fantastic music, very hard, heavy rock and hard and heavy lyrics. It all matches very well. She's she's very popular in the rock scene, whether you're inside or outside the Christianity and that kind of music. But one of my favorite artists for sure. Another one that I've been kind of on and off of for a few years, but this year really have gotten into, is another Christian rock band called Rusty Ship. They kind of are self-proclaimed nautical rock and roll, so they're very much like a rock band, kind of rock and roll, and all of their music lyrically is kind of themed after water and the oceans. You kind of get that from the name Rusty Ship. It's an abbreviation on the lead singer's name. Their music is really cool because it has a very unique sound. They're very niche, I think, in the way that they are creative with the rock kind of sound. They implement some nautical sounding instruments here and there throughout their music, but each record or album that they've put out so far, I believe they've done 3 albums so far, and then they got a new single for another album coming out soon, they're all concept albums. So each album tells a story, and a very interesting, very unique story. They all tie back to different themes from Christianity and scriptures from the Bible, stories from the Bible, but they're all done in such unique and interesting ways. Every time I listen to them, I pretty much have to just go listen to all 3 albums because they're all so unique, they're all so interesting, and there's no other band out there that I think that sounds like them and is doing Christian music and rock the way that they are. So I absolutely love Rusty Ship, especially this year as I've gotten into them more. Next, we have Red, which is a very popular Christian rock, Christian hard rock group. I discovered them on Innocence and Instinct, which was their second studio album. I think that album is probably a perfect album. And then the other album that I love most of theirs is probably Of Beauty and Rage. I've been off and on this band depending on what album is, so I just get into more than others. Innocence and Instinct and Of Beauty and Rage, I think, are perfect albums. You can't listen to the first song without going through the whole thing. It's not one you can shuffle around. You just got to listen to the whole thing because it kind of tells a story. It feels very cinematic in the way they do it. They implement a lot of string instruments throughout, the cello and the violin and stuff, which is really cool. So that kind of adds to the cinematic feel of it, but then it's also got some really cool guitar work with the hard rock style of it, some singing, some screaming, yelling. It's all really cool. They're another very unique, really cool, one of my favorite bands that I've listened to for a long time. And then we also have another one that I've listened to for a while, and that is 1,000 Foot Crutch. I grew up listening to the Art of Becoming album, or The Art of Breaking. The Art of Breaking and The Flame in All of Us. I also really enjoyed Welcome to the Masquerade by them, and then The End Is Where We Begin. It's hard for me to pick a favorite album by them, but it's one of those 4. Since then, they haven't really done anything that's kind of gripped me in the way that those albums did, but those albums are really great. They also have an alternative project that they did for a while where they were kind of an indie, more of an alternative rock band, I guess you would say, called FM Static. I really like their music as FM Static too, but 1,000 Foot Crutch is a favorite of mine. And then lastly, under the rock realm, another one that I was kind of off and on growing up, but I've been getting into a lot more in the past year or two, we have Falling Up. So I grew up listening to Crashing and Captiva, however you would pronounce it, by them, and then stopped listening to them for a while. And then since they've broken up and kind of gotten back together now, they had come out with a self-titled album of Falling Up, and I looped that album hard this past year. I really got into that one, and I listened to nothing but Falling Up for about a month or so too. So I really love rock still. Those are my favorite Christian rock artists probably, but more recently I've been getting into alternative rock, which is the next topic I'd like to discuss on this one. So my favorite band right now, which kind of has been growing and becoming more of my favorite band over the past couple of years, is Gable, Price and Friends. I discovered them a couple of years ago through an album. I think I randomly found them on Spotify. It was just one of those recommended ones. Spotify does a really good job sometimes about recommending music to you. Sometimes they're horrible about just replaying the same songs, but every once in a while they recommend something that's unique and interesting and really grips me. And Gable, Price and Friends was one of them, and I've loved them ever since. I've loved them more and more with every album they've come out with. I love everything that they do. I had an amazing opportunity to get to go see them in Columbus this past summer, which was awesome. It was a small venue, only like 400 or 500 people there. So we got, like 15 feet from the stage. We were up there with some friends and it was a great time. So Gable Price and Friends, they just released a new EP this year called Jungle in the City. It's an incredible record, fantastic little EP. Every song on it is fantastic. So if you want to check out some really cool alternative rock, definitely check out Gable Price and Friends. They're really cool because lyrically they're kind of controversial in that they're not afraid to talk about some of the more challenging aspects of the Christian lifestyle or just Christianity in general. You can tell they have a lot of experience growing up in the church and some of the good and bad that can come with that, and they write about it in their music in a really powerful way. So Gable Price and Friends, another very, very popular one that I've really enjoyed. Next, we have Fever Fever. These guys I got into when I was in college. These guys, I love everything that they've done as well. They're a bit more on they're kind of a mix between rock, alternative rock, indie rock, kind of folky a little bit here. They have a very unique sound. They're one of my absolute favorite bands to just jump into when I need to chill out, relax. They have very feel-good, easy listening music. And you definitely want to check them out if you're looking for some good, easy listening. Really cool storytelling throughout the lyrics, that kind of thing. So Fever Fever, another great one. Plum is a Christian rock band that I listened to a lot growing up. My dad was a big fan of them, so I became a big fan of them as well. I love pretty much everything they've done. I'll go on random kicks and just listen to nothing but them for a week or two. They do some really cool music as well. And then we have Colony House, which a couple of the guys in Colony House are sons of Stephen Curtis Chapman, if you're familiar with kind of especially 80s and 90s Christian CCM music. They have a recent album that came out last year or two, I think 2 years ago, or not 2024, 2023, I believe. I got obsessed with that album. I did nothing but that album for like 2 months. I almost burnt myself out on it and didn't really listen to it for a while after that. Now, since then, I've gone back and I listen to it pretty regularly, but that album is an absolutely incredible album. And then besides them, we have another one that I got obsessed with for a while, and that is Come Wind. This is a band that I discovered after they had split up, so they're not together anymore. The singer kind of does a solo project now. It's a very different sound, more on the indie side of things. But Come Wind was one of my favorite alternative rocks, mostly for this one album that they have called Move in Place. It's another one that just really challenges your faith, your beliefs in the way that they play the songs. They tell some interesting stories throughout a couple of the different songs there too. This is definitely one of my favorite alternative rock bands to listen to, and definitely one I want to recommend if you're looking for a good one out there. They have some really cool, kind of heavier stuff too, if you go back to a couple of their older albums, but definitely highly recommend them as well. So that's all my rock picks. We have Gable Price and Friends, Fever Fever, Plum, Colony House, Come Wind, and then back on the regular rock side of things, Flyleaf and Lacey Sturm, Rusty Ship, Red, 1,000 Foot Crutch, and Falling Up. So now on the metal side of things, I have been very not hesitant towards metal. It's always been something I've wanted to get into, but it was so hard for me to move past the screaming kind of thing and just see it as nothing but that. So I've always been a rock and hard rock kind of guy because I liked being able to hear the lyrics and stuff. So metal was always kind of a turnoff for me just because I didn't quite understand the screaming. I didn't like that I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I've always liked a few different bands and songs here and there. But this year, I've really gotten into metal music, and I would say I'm definitely a metalhead at this point. One of the ones that I was off again, on again for a while was Wolves at the Gate. They're now one of my favorite metal bands. This is one, I can't even pick an album. Pretty much every album of theirs is really great. I've loved every album of theirs that I've checked out. One recent one that I just got into in the past few months is Convictions. These guys are fantastic. Their lyrics are absolutely incredible. They tell some amazing and at times gut-wrenching stories that ask those really hard, really challenging questions that difficult life makes you ask yourself, makes you ask God, and makes you question in your beliefs and your faith. But it all points back to the glory that God has, the provision he has for our lives. And so the Convictions, they have a recently released album, The Fear of God, which is fantastic. I've been playing this album at least once or twice a week. When I first listened to it, it was all I listened to for a while. I hone in on albums randomly and will just listen to nothing but an album for a while. So Convictions, if you are in metal music at all, you definitely got to check out Convictions. They're one of the best Christian metal bands out there. I'm going to say this about any metal band that I'm going to talk about here for this top 5, but definitely Convictions. And then next is Bloodlines, comes another highly recommended one. They just put out a new EP this summer called Holiness Cries. I had never heard of them before, but I got into them this year as I've been getting into metal music more, and this album, this EP, is incredible. That has some very deep thematic, theological lyrics that I really enjoy. Each song on this EP is very intentional. I was listening to a podcast about them just today that I finished up. It's really cool, all the work that went into each of the songs on here. Each one focuses on something different, kind of picks up with like an invitation to, step into the Christian life and bear your cross. Then there's a song about addictions. There's a song about that's just like straight up worship, but through metal, and how like it's just still the hardcore metal kind of thing, but it's through music or through worship lyrically and stuff. Just fantastic music from these guys. Really good bunch of guys. Demon Hunter, a very popular one. If you're into metal at all, you've probably heard of Demon Hunter before. This is another one I can't really pick an album. I got into them on Extremist and have been listening to them ever since. I just thoroughly enjoy the majority of their music. They've been consistently great for a long time. And then lastly, what was my favorite band for a long time, but I don't dislike them at all, but I just have got, music tastes change over the years and stuff like that. So Disciple is still one of my favorite bands of all time. These guys are fantastic. I've had the chance to see them in concert 3 or 4 times. Their concerts are fantastic. Their lyrics are incredible. They have a really cool sound when it comes to the rock, hard rock, metal type thing. My wife always drives me crazy with it because she's like, I wish he'd just sing because he has such a beautiful voice, because I drag her to those concerts, obviously, because I love Disciple. And so she likes his softer, more, singing voice, where I enjoy that, but I also appreciate his screaming and yelling and stuff too. So they're definitely one of the gateway metal bands that I listened to growing up for a long time. I got into them on the Southern Hospitality album, and I've been on board ever since. So on the metal side of things, highly recommended for me. You got Wolves at the Gate, Convictions, Bloodlines, Demon Hunter, and Disciple. All of those bands are absolutely fantastic. So those are my favorite music genres. So we had metal, alternative rock, indie, foreign, composers, CCM, and rap. Those are some of my favorite music genres to listen to. Thank you for indulging me in this very long, 30-minute long video where I talk about some of my favorite genres and favorite music out there. Thanks for checking this one out. Thank you for sticking around to the end. If you have, I'll see you in the next video.